nginx, FreeBSD for F.
E for nginx, that's weird.
Yeah, it should be N, but I guess FNP doesn't
Fnp.
sound as good. What's going on, guys? You're just joining us in the middle of a spirited discussion on the FEMP stack, apparently, which is FreeBSD, nginx as a web server, MySQL for the database layer, and PHP as our interpreter for application code. And this is just going to be the first of, I think, 2 or 3 videos where we're going to take you through installing this basic web application stack, and at the end of this video you will have nginx configured and running, ready to handle PHP requests by passing them down to PHP FastCGI Process Manager, and from there you'll be able to install PHP MySQL apps like WordPress, which we will do in this example in either the next video or the video after that. So I'm going to introduce, this is the first episode where I ever have a co-host, a man much smarter and more beautiful than I, Christian. Say hey.
Hi there.
Hey. Christian is a man of brains and brawn. He puts me to shame as a Linux and BSD sysadmin. He actually introduced me to the BSDs, for which I am forever thankful. And he's also a programmer extraordinaire. So, and you know, this is sad, but I work for a security company, and I really get the feeling that you know more about security than I do as well, which disgusts me. That said,
You know how to make it a product.
yeah, exactly. So you're calling me just a bullshitter. Thank you. That said, here's this savage beast known as Christian, and together we're just going to set up this this little thing here. I've got him on here because he is going to be able to answer a lot of questions that come up for me. I'm not used to being a FreeBSD admin, but I'm sort of moving in that direction. And he also runs nginx every single day at work. So he's going to be able to explain a lot of the details of why we are doing things that might be different from a lot of the online tutorials you find. However, that said, we're going to follow pretty closely one of the new DigitalOcean FreeBSD tutorials, which we will link to. They've got a couple authors writing FreeBSD tutorials. One of them, and his tutorials, what we'll be using today, is Justin Ellingwood. So thanks for that. I will link to it, and you'll find almost all the code we're using in that tutorial. We're following it fairly closely, just for the basic setup. And then in upcoming videos, we'll discuss maybe some optimization, some security improvements, and then some performance enhancements like caching, etc. Okay, it's been 3 minutes and we haven't done anything yet. Let's get started. So the very first thing we're going to do is install the packages we need. That would be nginx, MySQL, PHP, and php-fpm, which strangely I don't see as like
Nope.
one of the packages here, right?
It's yeah, it's part of PHP by now.
Is that right?
It's split up by Debian because they like to split up stuff.
You know, this is my problem. Being on Debian-based systems all day, all I see is Debian's weirdly like packaged and modified version of everything. Yeah.
Doc and Devil and whatever.
So those bad old days are gone, and ahead of me lies beautiful Unixy purity, which I will now get used to. So we're sitting here on a shared tmux session, so we'll both be talking and typing. Let's just get these packages installed. We're going to leave out nginx because we already have nginx installed. However, you would simply add the package nginx to what we're typing in here. So we'll say, if this is a brand new VPS, you would say package update. Is it upgrade, the second one? Yeah. And it would ask you, it would download the, are they called repositories in FreeBSD as well?
Yes. Yeah, they are.
They would download the repositories and sort of bootstrap your package manager. And then all you have to do is package install. So for you, nginx, if you don't have it installed, we've got a slightly customized version of nginx installed already. MySQL 5.6 server, PHP 5.6, PHP 5.6 MySQL. So far, so good. Install everything, don't even read it. And then the next step is just going to be configuring these things to start as services when you boot up. Let's get in there. I'm going to be showing stuff with Nano I think Christian's going to be using Vim. You can use either one. If you're totally new to like working on the command line, I suggest Nano as a first thing if you don't want to spend like a week getting comfortable with Vim. But either one is fine. We don't want to start editor wars, because if we do, I'm bringing Emacs like onto the server right now. So the only thing we've got running so far is SSH. So here's what we're enabling. So we've got MySQL, nginx, and PHP Fast CGI Process Manager enabled and running, so these things should be starting automatically at boot. We will save the rc.conf file. For those of you coming from Linux, do you want to kind of give a quick intro to the rc.conf file for like a person such as myself coming from the Linux world?
The rc.conf file is something that is basically a general configuration system for FreeBSD. It's similar to rc local, just that you already have services that you can just enable or disable. It usually also contains stuff like network configuration, like the host name or which IPs you're using, but we are in a jail here, so you don't see that right now. But maybe we'll make a video about it in the future.
Yeah, you would see this on like the machine, the physical machine that this jail is running on. You would see a whole bunch more in rc.conf. Obviously in a jail or anything that's running a very restricted set of binaries or a restricted environment, not going to have a whole lot going on in there. So for those of you who are curious, we're doing this install, even though I usually do Linux videos, I'm going to start doing some sort of intro to FreeBSD for people coming from Linux, because it is absolutely something that warrants attention. Like, it's a very serious operating system, or family of operating systems, and you should just be comfortable with it, because it'll make you, I mean, from a purely selfish perspective, A, it's going to make your life easier and more fun running stuff on FreeBSD if that's the right tool for the job, and B, it's going to make you much more employable. Like, you're just going to stand head and shoulders above someone who only has experience with, like, I know Ubuntu. Well, great. Perhaps we'll make something a little bit bigger as like an intro to the BSDs for Linux people. Stay tuned. Oh yeah, we're going to user local etc, and we'll say the php-fpm.conf, and here's where we're going to configure the Fast CGI Process Manager to communicate with nginx through a socket. And we'll do that by searching for listen. Great. There we go. Okay, so here's our socket. If I'm not mistaken, this can also just be a TCP socket, but it's already starting as a... we're just gonna... what are we putting in here? var run php-fpm.sock. So instead of using TCP for this, we're just going to say a Unix sock file at var run php-fpm.sock. And we're going to look for more listens. Oh, there it is. Did you see that? There you go. So, owner, group, and mode. I guess that's already the default, huh? Or do I have to uncomment that?
No, I think it's the default, yeah.
So, default is already running as this that we want. The owner, so the user and the group are www. I think on Linux this is www-data, is that right? On the Debians, at least?
Yeah, on
I don't
the
know.
Debians it is.
And listen mode, file mode.
It's just like, it says it's the user that it is running at.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it's www by default.
Okay, so we will just set this specifically, explicitly. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So we're just going to uncomment this to be sure that that's what we're getting, so we don't have weird, like, can't read upstream or whatever the error is.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got our socket basically set up or configured. What else is in here? Oh yeah, the php-conf. Ini-production to php-ini. So we're going to create a php-ini. Great. And edit that php.ini file. So this will be our production top-level php-ini. And what we're going to search for here is to prevent some mean people from doing very simple exploits against us by getting PHP to like try to be smart about what path they may be meant. We're just going to look for fix path info and explicitly set this to 0 to prevent all of that. Do you know more about this? I actually don't know much about, like, this is cargo cult stuff that I'm doing here. I've just heard that this is the case. I don't really understand it. Any insight?
What it is preventing is that it prints you a lot of information about your PHP environment, which is useful if you program a PHP application, so you know what's going on inside of your application.
Sure.
But it might reveal information that you don't want an attacker to know, so you make sure you don't throw it on them.
Okay.
It also prevents them from like having path of where scripts lie, so they can cause remote code execution and other things.
Thank you. That is much clearer. Thank you. Okay, so we're preventing this horrific problem from ever being a horrific problem. We'll just have other horrific problems, such as actually running PHP and WordPress. And I guess it's time to start our services, right? So service PHP FPM start and service mysql-server start, and everything's been created. Lovely. And now we'll say mysql _secure installation. This will be a wizard that forces us to set like a strong root password, among other things. We're going to remove all the anonymous users. We're going to only use this from our local machine, so we're not even going to listen for people trying to log in remotely. We're going to remove our test database and make this actually take effect. Okay, easy enough. So it's a little bit more secure now. MySQL-server restart. I'm doing the thing where I restart instead of reload. Start up nginx. Where? Edit the nginx.conf. Oh, and before we do this, you want to use sysctl, right, to check how many CPUs we're seeing, if you would be so kind.
Yeah.
So for deciding, maybe you should talk about this. You know way more about it than I do. For basically figuring out how you're gonna, how many threads you're gonna run nginx as, or how many processes you'll have running for it, you want to look at how many CPUs or virtual CPUs you have on your server or VPS.
Yeah, you can do so in FreeBSD by using sysctl, which allows you to switch a lot of system configuration, but also to look up a lot of stuff like your CPU temperature or the number of CPU cores you have. You do that with sysctl, HW for hardware, and NCPU for the number of CPUs.
So this would be like echoing out values from like proc, like the proc virtual file system in Linux? Or can it do more than that?
It's pretty similar. It's a bit like the sysctl that Linux itself has. But it's basically the main way to configure your system, which also includes variables that you would in Linux often set in your kernel configuration. Sometimes not, or in your when you set for kernel modules certain options, you usually do that way.
Cool. I have many good memories of forgetting to use sysctl like p and having nothing happen as a result. Okay, so we've got 8 threads available to us, or 8 CPUs that we see. So now we can just go and edit the nginx configuration. There's a couple things we changed, and I'm just going to go through them so you can change this yourself. You can basically copy and paste from the tutorial that we linked to before. The DigitalOcean tutorial has this. The user that we're going to run our nginx worker processes as is the www user. So also the directory var www will be owned by that user. So wherever the root of your site is will also be owned by them. You're going to run as many worker processes, most likely, as you have CPUs or vCPUs to distribute load. Christian, do you want to just talk quickly about why that is and how they're used by nginx?
Basically, you want, if you have either many users visiting your website or your blog or whatever, have each request run by a different CPU, so you can use your CPU, but also when you have multiple users connecting, when you have, like, say, 20 users, you don't want to just use one CPU to process the requests, and that's exactly what this does.
So there you go. Spread load to as many processors as you have access to. The other thing we changed here was we simply turned gzip on to compress things like CSS and JavaScript files on their way to the client. And then in the server block, we added a server name. We have a single site here, so we're not doing like per site configurations yet. And we're just adding our IP address here. If you have a domain name, you would put the domain name here, and you would have individual server blocks for each vhost that you want to host here. So the other thing we changed was the root for this. Actually, we added the index.php because we'll be serving PHP files and not just static HTML. So we added index.php here for the files that it looks for. We changed the location of the site root to var www. We added, so for the location here, you're going to try files, the URI, slash, and otherwise a 404. What else did we change? Oh yeah, and then the PHP location for our PHP files, they actually started us. You'll probably have a commented out section that covers this, but you're basically looking at this here. So that would be for anything that ends in PHP, you're gonna you wanna take them through this. You know this better than I do.
What that block does is that it, for every PHP file or PHP request it encounters, it first checks whether a PHP file matches. So if it doesn't match, it will return a 404 page. If it does match, it will pass the request in such a way that the application handles it, which is pretty much the default here. In the next line, we tell it to actually pass the request to the php-fpm process that we added earlier. The next file is a typical index, just that we use the PHP index file, of course, here, because we don't deal with HTML. And the next two lines just tell nginx how to communicate with PHP fastCGI process manager.
Bingo.
And that's it.
Which we just set up before this, so that's all set really. Did we make any other changes? No, this is pretty much it.
Yes.
You can save this. Again, it's probably easier to just copy and paste the finished configuration file from the DigitalOcean article that we're loosely following here. That will work for you. We can just test this, right? nginx t. Yay! Okay, so testing our configuration file lets us make sure we didn't leave out any semicolons or curly braces. We'll need to make sure that var dub exists, and it does not. So we'll need to do that, and we'll just copy the current index page over. Or should we just make a PHP info page? Okay. We've got a PHP info, hard one, and what are the permissions? Not so good. Should we just change this to dub user and group? oops. So explicitly, but whatever, we're changing ownership of this directory to www user and group. And since we already have a file in here, we'll just say, oops. Is it big R or little r? I never know. Ah! Wonderful. Service, nginx, reload. Now, you caught me doing a restart of the service before. Can you tell me just quickly why that is a terrible idea?
Usually it's mostly a terrible idea when you already have something up and running, because it disconnects all the clients, and it also prevents your configuration from being validated before your nginx starting up, which means if you have an error, you will have a downtime.
And if it catches an error in your configuration file, it simply won't kill off the current. I mean, it's not going to stop and reload the service. So it's a much safer way of doing this, especially if you have an application that maybe is already running and already has users attached to it. So there you go. We've already created var www here. If it doesn't exist, you could just do make dir var www, whatever your site is. If it's in there, you would obviously have to change the server root location if you were going to have your site be somewhere else. Next thing we did was change the owner to www for this directory. And since we already have some files in there, we're just going to do this recursively. And you can see everything's owned by the www user and group. And all we've got here is a very simple PHP info page and a very simple index page. So we can access the site and run PHP. And that if we simply access it, we get a static HTML page. So this is set up and working. All that remains is to set up WordPress itself, which is a fairly simple process. PHP, FPM, and MySQL and nginx are already running. It's going to be the same on Linux or FreeBSD or basically anywhere else you do that. Okay, so you have nginx set up and ready to serve static content and PHP by handing it off to PHP Fast CGI Process Manager. And we're just going to have a very quick video to show you how to set up WordPress. And that'll be that. You'll have WordPress running. And then anything we do after that will be security, which is a huge deal if you're running, to quote one person, I think Daniel Miesler, an open wound, which is PHP, running another open wound, which is WordPress. Yeah, we'll look a little bit at security, and we'll also look at some performance stuff, because WordPress is just so unthinkably slow that you wouldn't believe it unless you turn on some serious caching at a couple different layers. That said, we'll see you in the next video.
See you.